December 26, 1996, 5:52 a.m. Patsy Ramsey dials 911, her voice frantic, trembling. Her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, is gone. A ransom note sits on the kitchen staircase, demanding $118,000, the exact amount of John Ramsey's recent bonus. But this wasn't a kidnapping. 8 hours later, John Ramsey would find his daughter's body in the basement of their own home. What happened in that house? And why, after nearly 3 decades, does new DNA evidence point investigators back to the very beginning? This is the story of one of America's most haunting unsolved cases, a case that has generated countless theories, destroyed reputations, and left more questions than answers. The JonBenét Ramsey case isn't just a mystery. It's a cautionary tale about how evidence can be contaminated, how media can convict the innocent, and how the truth can remain hidden in plain sight for decades. What really happened on that Christmas night in Boulder, Colorado? The answer may finally be emerging from the shadows. Before we unlock the vault on this complex investigation, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Here at True Crime Vault, we dive deep into the cases that demand justice and remembrance. New investigations every week. And if you think you know this case, I promise you, there are details here that will change everything you thought you knew. Hit that like button and drop your theory in the comments. Now, let's begin. Christmas Day, 1996. The Ramsey family, one of Boulder's most prominent households, celebrates the holiday in their 15-room Tudor-style mansion at 755 15th Street. John Ramsey, 53, a successful businessman and CEO of Access Graphics, a computer services company valued at over $1 billion. Patsy Ramsey, 40, a former Miss West Virginia, devoted mother, and active community member. Their son Burke, 9 years old, and JonBenét, just 6, a child beauty pageant star with blonde hair, bright eyes, and a smile that lit up every room she entered. The Ramsey home was a showpiece, nearly 7,000 square feet spread across 3 floors plus a basement. The property was worth approximately $700,000 in 1996, a significant sum for Boulder at the time. The neighborhood, University Hill, was quiet, affluent, filled with professors and professionals. It was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors, where children played outside without fear, where violent crime was almost unheard of. That sense of safety would be shattered forever on December 26th. The family attended a Christmas party at the home of Fleet and Priscilla White, close friends of the Ramseys. The Whites lived just a few blocks away. The party was pleasant, festive. JonBenét played with other children. Burke spent time with friends. John and Patsy mingled with guests, enjoying the holiday spirit. They left around 9 p.m., possibly closer to 9:30 p.m. Different witnesses would give slightly different times, a small inconsistency that would later be scrutinized by investigators looking for any discrepancy in the family's account. According to John and Patsy, they returned home and began preparing for an early morning trip. The family was scheduled to fly to Charlevoix, Michigan, on their private plane at 7 a.m. the next morning to spend a second Christmas with John's older children from his first marriage. Patsy said she put JonBenét to bed, that the child was asleep, exhausted from the excitement of Christmas. John carried her from the car to her bedroom. She was wearing a red turtleneck, but Patsy changed her into white long underwear and a knit shirt. Burke, according to his parents, went to his room. The house was quiet, normal, peaceful. It would be the last normal moment that family would ever know. But there are questions about that timeline. Burke Ramsey, in a 2016 interview with Dr. Phil McGraw, stated that he actually stayed downstairs after arriving home, playing with a toy. He said he went to bed later than his parents initially claimed. This contradiction, small as it seems, opened the door to speculation. If Burke was awake, if he was downstairs, what did he see? What did he hear? And why did the initial family account not mention this? 5:52 a.m., December 26th. Patsy Ramsey walks down the spiral staircase toward the kitchen. She's dressed, wearing the same black velvet pants and red sweater she wore to the party the night before. She later claimed she put these clothes back on that morning, planning to wear them for the trip to Michigan. There, on the wooden steps, she finds 3 pages of handwritten lined paper, a ransom note. She reads the first lines and panic seizes her. "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. The note continues with specific demands. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. The note warns John not to contact police, FBI, or anyone else. It threatens JonBenet's life. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. Patsy screams for John. She races upstairs to JonBenet's bedroom. The door is open. The bed is empty. JonBenet is gone. At 5:52 a.m., Patsy calls 911. The dispatcher, Kim Archuleta, answers. Patsy's voice is barely coherent. We have a kidnapping. There's a ransom note. Please send help. The dispatcher tries to calm her down, asks questions. Patsy is hysterical. John can be heard in the background. The call lasts 5 minutes and 51 seconds, and it would become one of the most analyzed pieces of audio in true crime history. Audio experts would later examine that 911 call. At the end of the recording, there's a portion where Patsy appears to believe she's hung up the phone, but the line remains open for several more seconds. Some analysts claim they can hear 3 voices. Patsy saying something like, "Help me, Jesus." John's voice possibly saying, "We're not speaking to you." And a third voice, possibly Burke's, asking, "What did you find?" The Boulder Police Department claims they enhanced the audio and heard these voices. The Ramseys dispute this interpretation. They insist Burke was asleep in his room, that he wasn't part of that conversation. The debate over those final seconds of the 911 call continues to this day. Boulder Police Officer Rick French arrives at 755 15th Street at 5:59 a.m., 7 minutes after the 911 call. He's the first responder. He's a patrol officer, not a detective. He's responding to a reported kidnapping. He performs a quick search of the house. He checks doors, windows, potential entry points. Everything appears secure. No broken glass, no forced entry. He walks through the main floor, the second floor, checks bedrooms. He even opens the basement door and calls down, but doesn't conduct a thorough search of that area. He doesn't go down the stairs. He doesn't check the rooms. It's a decision that will haunt him forever. Within the hour, the Ramsey home is filled with people. Detectives arrive, victim advocates, friends, family. The Whites arrive, Fleet and Priscilla. Reverend Raul Hoverstock, the family's pastor, comes to provide comfort. John Fernie, another close friend. Barbara Fernie, his wife. People are bringing food, offering support, waiting with the family for the ransom call that, according to the note, should come between 8 and 10 a.m. The crime scene, if it was one, is being contaminated minute by minute. People walk through the house. They touch surfaces. They move items. They use bathrooms. They sit on furniture. Evidence is being destroyed with every passing moment. Detective Linda Arndt arrives around 8 a.m. She's assigned to the case. She's alone for much of the morning. Backup is delayed. Other detectives are dealing with different situations. Arndt is in the Ramsey home with a growing crowd of people, trying to manage what she believes is a kidnapping investigation. She watches John Ramsey. She watches Patsy. She notes their behavior. John appears controlled, making phone calls, pacing. Patsy is emotional, dramatic, lying on the floor at times, praying, crying out for JonBenet. Some observers see genuine grief. Others see performance. The ransom note itself is bizarre. 3 handwritten pages on a pad of paper found inside the Ramsey home. The pad was Patsy's, kept near the kitchen phone. The pen used was also from the house, a Sharpie pen that was returned to the pen jar after the note was written. Who writes a ransom note inside the victim's house using materials from that house? Who takes the time to write 3 pages when 2 sentences would suffice? And who replaces the pen after committing a kidnapping? The note is long, unusually long for a ransom demand. Most ransom notes are brief. We have your daughter. Pay this amount. Follow these instructions. But this note rambles. It references movies. Don't try to grow a brain, John, is a line from Dirty Harry. The reference to monitor and scanning devices sounds like dialogue from Speed. The tone shifts between threatening and almost conversational. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Who talks like that in a genuine ransom note? The amount demanded is oddly specific. $118,000, not $100,000, not $150,000, but $118,000, the exact amount of John's recent Christmas bonus. How would kidnappers know that number? John had received the bonus just days earlier. It wasn't public information. The only people who would know that figure were John, Patsy, perhaps their accountant, and anyone who had access to their financial records or overheard conversations about it. This detail has always pointed investigators back towards someone with inside knowledge of the Ramsey family finances. Handwriting experts would later analyze the note. Patsy Ramsey was asked to provide handwriting samples. Multiple experts were brought in by both the police and the defense. The results were inconclusive. Some experts said they could not eliminate Patsy as the author. The letter formations, the spacing, certain quirks matched her handwriting. But other experts said the differences were too significant, that Patsy didn't write the note. John Ramsey's handwriting was ruled out by all experts. Burke, at 9 years old, didn't have the vocabulary or writing ability to produce such a note. So if Patsy didn't write it, who did? The ransom note was written on pages 2, 3, and 4 of the notepad. Page 1 had a practice start, Mr. and Mrs., written and then crossed out. Whoever wrote the note made a false start, tore off that page, and began again on the next page. This suggests the note was written in the house, not prepared ahead of time. It suggests the writer had time, wasn't rushed, felt comfortable enough to sit down with a notepad and compose 3 pages of demands. Does that sound like an intruder? Or does it sound like someone who lived there? 8 a.m. comes and goes. No call from kidnappers. 9 a.m., still no call. 10 a.m., the deadline mentioned in the ransom note. Nothing. John Ramsey makes arrangements to get the money together, though the banks are closed for the day after Christmas. Friends offer to help, but the call never comes. The silence is deafening. What kind of kidnappers demand a ransom and then never contact the family? What kind of kidnappers write an elaborate note and then abandon the plan? 1 p.m. Hours have passed since the 911 call. No contact from kidnappers. The mood in the house is shifting from hope to dread. Detective Linda Arndt, who has been at the house all morning, is increasingly concerned. She suggests that John and Fleet White search the house again, top to bottom, anywhere they haven't looked. She wants them to do something, to feel productive. It's a suggestion that will lead to the discovery that changes everything. John Ramsey and Fleet White head to the basement. They walk past the boiler room. They check storage areas. They approach a small, rarely used room, sometimes called the wine cellar. It's a small room, about 12 feet by 8 feet, used for storage. The door has a wooden latch, a simple block of wood that swivels to keep the door closed. John reaches for it. He opens the door. The room is dark. He flips on the light. And there, on the white blanket on the concrete floor, is Jonbenet. John lets out a scream. He rushes to his daughter. He picks her up, cradling her body. Her skin is cold. Rigor mortis has set in. There's duct tape over her mouth. A white cord is tied around her neck, fashioned into a garrote with a broken paintbrush handle. Her wrists have cord loosely wrapped around them. John carries her upstairs, contaminating the crime scene further, destroying potential evidence with every step. He lays her on the floor in the hallway near the Christmas tree. Detective Arndt sees the body and immediately knows this is no longer a kidnapping. This is a homicide. Detective Arndt later testified that when John brought Jonbenet's body upstairs, she looked at him and felt a chill. She said in that moment, she believed John Ramsey knew more than he was saying. She counted the number of people in the house, counted the rounds in her weapon, and realized she was outnumbered. Her testimony would be controversial, criticized by some as unprofessional and by others as the honest reaction of an officer whose instincts were screaming danger. But in that moment, the crime scene was chaos. The house should have been evacuated immediately. The body should have been left in place. Forensic teams should have been called. But none of that happened. People continued to mill about. Patsy collapsed, screaming. Friends tried to comfort her. The body lay in the hallway. Officer Rick French, the first responding officer, was called back. He saw the body and realized he had walked past that basement room hours earlier without checking it thoroughly. The guilt would consume him. The autopsy, conducted by Dr. John Meyer of the Boulder County Coroner's Office, reveals the horror. Jonbenet died from asphyxiation due to strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. There's an 8.5-inch linear fracture in her skull, located on the right side of her head. The fracture is extensive. It would have required significant force. A blow from a heavy object, possibly a baseball bat, a flashlight, or a similar instrument. The coroner estimated the blow would have rendered Jonbenet unconscious immediately. But here's where it gets complicated. The strangulation came later. How much later is debated. Some experts say minutes. Others say up to an hour or more. The garrote, the device used to strangle Jonbenet, was tightened with brutal efficiency. It compressed her neck, cutting off air and blood flow to the brain. The combination of the head injury and the strangulation proved fatal. But the sequence matters. If the head blow was accidental and the strangulation was done to cover it up, that suggests a very different scenario than if both were deliberate acts of violence. There are also signs of sexual trauma. The autopsy revealed injuries consistent with sexual contact, both acute, meaning recent, and possibly chronic, meaning ongoing. This finding is one of the most controversial aspects of the case. Some experts believe the injuries indicate a history of abuse. Others believe the injuries were caused during the assault on the night of her death. The debate is intense, emotional, and unresolved. What's undeniable is that Jonbenet suffered injuries that suggest a sexual component to the crime. Pineapple is found in Jonbenet's digestive system. Fresh pineapple, partially digested, suggesting she ate it 1 to 2 hours before her death. But John and Patsy insist Jonbenet was asleep when they arrived home, that she never woke up, never ate anything. A bowl of pineapple with a spoon is found on the kitchen table. The bowl is large, white. The spoon is a serving spoon, too big for a child to use comfortably. Burke's fingerprints are on the bowl. Patsy's fingerprints are on the bowl. Jonbenet's are not. What does this mean? Did Jonbenet wake up? Did she come downstairs? Did someone give her pineapple? And why would her parents deny it? The pineapple has become one of the most debated pieces of evidence. Some believe Burke gave Jonbenet the pineapple, that they were both awake late at night, and that something happened between them that escalated into tragedy. Others believe an intruder gave Jonbenet pineapple, though this raises the question of why an intruder would take the time to feed her. The pineapple remains a puzzle that doesn't fit neatly into any theory. The crime scene itself tells a complicated story. There's a basement window with a broken pane, a window John Ramsey claims he broke months earlier when he was locked out. He said he broke the window, climbed through, and never fixed it. Is this the intruder's entry point, or is it staging? A suitcase sits beneath the window. On top of the suitcase, a shard of glass. If someone climbed out through that window, wouldn't the glass have been knocked off? There's also a scuff mark on the wall, possibly from a shoe, but no definitive evidence of an intruder. No footprints in the snow outside the window. No disturbance in the layer of dust on the windowsill. The garrote, the device used to strangle Jonbenet, is fashioned from white cord and a piece of Patsy's paintbrush, a brush from her art supplies in the basement. The paintbrush was broken in 3 pieces. One piece was used to create the toggle for the garrote. The other pieces were found in Patsy's art supply tray. The construction is crude but effective. It's tightened with a wooden toggle, a method that would require some knowledge, some deliberation. Whoever made this device had time. They had access to materials in the house, and they demonstrated a disturbing level of control and brutality. Then there's the duct tape over Jonbenet's mouth and the cord around her wrists. The duct tape is a specific brand, not found elsewhere in the Ramsey home. Investigators searched the house, the garage, every storage area. They never found a roll of duct tape that matched. The white cord also not sourced to the house. The rope was a specific type, nylon cord, and despite extensive searches, its origin was never determined. If this was an intruder, they brought these items with them. But if this was staging, where did these materials come from? And why hasn't the source ever been found? Jonbenet's body was found wrapped in a white blanket, a blanket from her own room. She was wearing the white long underwear, the knit shirt, and white long johns over the underwear. The long johns were too big for her, size 12-14 when Jonbenet wore size 6. Patsy later said she bought the oversized underwear as part of a package, that Jonbenet sometimes wore them. But the sizing discrepancy raised questions. Were these the clothes Jonbenet was wearing when she was killed? Or was she redressed after death? The investigation quickly becomes a media circus. Cable news picks up the story. JonBenet's face, the images from her beauty pageants, the footage of her performing in makeup and costumes, floods television screens across America. The public is captivated and divided. Some see a tragic victim of an intruder. Others see a family hiding dark secrets. The beauty pageant footage is played over and over. JonBenet singing God Bless America in a red, white, and blue outfit. JonBenet dancing in a feathered costume. JonBenet smiling, poised, confident beyond her years. The pageant world becomes a focal point of scrutiny. Critics argue that dressing children in makeup, glamorous outfits, and teaching them to perform provocatively is inappropriate, even dangerous. They suggest the pageants attracted predators, that JonBenet was being exploited. Patsy Ramsey defends the pageants, saying they were fun, that JonBenet loved performing. But the images are uncomfortable for many viewers. A 6-year-old in lipstick and false eyelashes. A 6-year-old on stage, posing and dancing. It sparks a national conversation about childhood, innocence, and exploitation. Boulder Police, a department more accustomed to bike thefts and college town disturbances, is overwhelmed. They've never handled a case of this magnitude. The department has about 200 officers. Boulder is a city of 100,000 people, a university town known for its liberal politics, outdoor recreation, and low crime rate. The last murder in Boulder occurred years earlier. The detectives assigned to the Ramsey case are experienced, but not with this type of crime. Mistakes are made. The crime scene was compromised from the beginning. Evidence collection is delayed. The house isn't properly secured until late afternoon on December 26th. Friends and family are allowed to wander freely. It's a cascade of errors that will make prosecuting this case nearly impossible. The lead detective on the case is initially Detective Commander John Eller. He's later joined by Detective Steve Thomas and Detective Tom Trujillo. These men will spend years working the case, following leads, interviewing witnesses, analyzing evidence. But from the beginning, there's tension. Tension between the police and the district attorney's office. Tension between detectives who believe the family is guilty and those who remain open to other possibilities. Tension between Boulder police and outside experts brought in to consult. The case becomes a political nightmare. Within days, suspicion falls on the family. John and Patsy Ramsey, even 9-year-old Burke. The theory emerges that this was not a kidnapping. This was a cover-up. That someone in the house killed JonBenet, possibly by accident, and then staged an elaborate kidnapping scene to deflect blame. The ransom note, the garrote, the duct tape, all of it designed to point away from the family. This theory gains traction within the Boulder Police Department, and it's leaked to the media. But John and Patsy maintain their innocence. They hire lawyers. Prominent criminal defense attorneys Brian Morgan and Hal Haddon represent them. They agree to interviews, but only under specific conditions. They will not submit to separate interrogations by Boulder police. They will not take polygraph tests administered by the police. These decisions are strategic, based on their lawyers' advice, but they look suspicious to the public and to investigators. If you're innocent, why not cooperate fully? The Ramseys argue they are cooperating, that they've given interviews, provided handwriting samples, allowed their home to be searched. But the perception is that they're hiding something. They appear on CNN with Brian Cabot on January 1st, 1997, just 6 days after JonBenet's death. Patsy, tearful, wearing a cross necklace, begs for information. "There is a killer on the loose," she says. "This person must be stopped before they hurt another child." John is stoic, controlled, his jaw tight. "We did not do this," he insists. "Someone came into our home and killed our daughter. We want that person found and prosecuted." But the public isn't convinced. The narrative has already been written in the media. Parents who put their daughter in beauty pageants. Wealthy. Privileged. Hiding something. The court of public opinion has rendered its verdict. The Boulder District Attorney's Office and the Boulder Police Department clash openly. Alex Hunter, the district attorney, is a veteran prosecutor who has been in office since 1973. He's known for being cautious, for building cases carefully before filing charges. He believes the evidence against the Ramseys, while suspicious, isn't strong enough to charge anyone. The police, particularly Detective Steve Thomas, are convinced the Ramseys are guilty, specifically Patsy. Thomas believes Patsy killed JonBenet in a fit of rage, possibly over a bedwetting incident, and that John helped cover it up. It's a theory that will dominate the investigation for years. Detective Thomas becomes the face of the investigation. He works the case obsessively, tracking down leads, interviewing witnesses, analyzing evidence. He believes the truth is obvious. The family did it, but he can't prove it, not to the standard required for criminal prosecution. The evidence is circumstantial, the forensics are compromised, and the DA won't file charges. Thomas grows increasingly frustrated. The case is consuming him. His health suffers. His marriage suffers. The obsession is destroying his life. In 1998, Detective Steve Thomas resigns from the Boulder Police Department in frustration. He writes a scathing letter to Alex Hunter, excoriating the DA's office for refusing to prosecute the Ramseys. He accuses Hunter of being too cozy with the defense, of allowing the Ramseys' wealth and influence to shield them from justice. He later publishes a book, JonBenét, Inside the Ramsey Murder Investigation, laying out his theory in detail. He writes that Patsy Ramsey killed her daughter in a rage after JonBenét wet the bed, struck her with a flashlight, and then staged an elaborate kidnapping to cover it up. The Ramseys sue him for defamation. The case is eventually settled, but Thomas never wavers from his belief that the family is responsible. But there's a problem with the family theory. DNA. In 1997, DNA testing is conducted on evidence from the crime scene. Standard DNA testing, the technology available at the time, is performed on blood found in JonBenet's underwear and on material collected from under her fingernails. The results show the presence of male DNA that does not match any member of the Ramsey family. Not John, not Burke. The DNA belongs to an unknown male. This is significant. This is evidence that could point to an intruder. The DNA profile is entered into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, a database containing DNA profiles from convicted offenders and unsolved crimes. There's no match. The unknown male's DNA is not in the system. This means either the person has never been convicted of a crime, or their DNA has never been collected. It's a lead, but it doesn't point to anyone specific. Investigators are skeptical of the DNA evidence. Could it be contamination? Could it be from factory workers at the underwear manufacturing plant? Could it be innocent transfer, unrelated to the crime? The debate over this DNA will continue for decades. Some experts argue that the DNA is probative, that it's strong evidence of an intruder. Others dismiss it, saying that touch DNA and trace DNA can be transferred innocently, that it doesn't necessarily indicate the presence of a killer. The Boulder Police Department largely discounts the DNA evidence, at least in the early years of the investigation. They believe the family is guilty and the DNA is a red herring. This fundamental disagreement between investigators will hamper the case for years. In 1999, a grand jury is convened. For 13 months, they hear testimony, they review evidence, they examine hundreds of exhibits, they listen to experts, they interview witnesses, including John and Patsy Ramsey. The proceedings are secret, as grand jury proceedings always are. The public waits. The media speculates. What will the grand jury decide? Will they indict the Ramseys? Will there finally be charges, a trial, accountability? In October 1999, the grand jury votes. District Attorney Alex Hunter makes a stunning announcement. There will be no indictment. He states that the evidence is insufficient to file charges. I and my prosecution task force believe we do not have sufficient evidence to warrant the filing of charges against anyone who has been investigated at this time, Hunter says. The case for now remains open. Unsolved. A failure of justice that devastates JonBenet's extended family and frustrates a nation demanding answers. The Ramseys are not charged. They are not cleared. They exist in a limbo, suspected but not prosecuted. But here's what the public didn't know. The grand jury actually did vote to indict. This fact remained secret for 14 years. In 2013, after a legal battle, the indictment is unsealed. The documents reveal that the grand jury voted to charge John and Patsy Ramsey not with murder, but with 2 counts each. Count 4, child abuse resulting in death. Count 7, accessory to a crime. The indictment suggests the grand jury believed the parents either contributed to JonBenet's death through abuse or neglect, or helped cover up the crime after someone else committed it. The indictment reads, in part, on or between December 25th and December 26th, 1996, in Boulder County, Colorado, JonBenét Ramsey did unlawfully, knowingly, recklessly, and feloniously permit a child to be unreasonably placed in a situation which posed a threat of injury to the child's life or health, which resulted in the death of JonBenét Ramsey, a child under the age of 16. The same language is used for Patsy. The accessory charge states they did render assistance to a person with intent to hinder, delay, and prevent the discovery, detention, apprehension, prosecution, conviction, and punishment of such person for the commission of a crime, knowing the person being assisted has committed and was suspected of the crime of murder in the first degree and child abuse resulting in death. But Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment. Under Colorado law, the district attorney must sign the indictment for it to be filed. Hunter believed the evidence wouldn't hold up in court, that the language of the indictment was too vague, that it didn't specify who killed JonBenét or how the parents were involved. He made the decision not to prosecute. The Ramseys never knew they had been indicted until the documents were made public in 2013, years after Patsy's death. The revelation shocked the nation. A grand jury believed there was enough evidence to charge the parents, but the DA refused to follow through. John and Patsy Ramsey try to rebuild their lives. They move away from Boulder to Atlanta, Georgia, Patsy's hometown. They stay out of the public eye as much as possible. They continue to fight for their reputations. They cooperate with investigators when asked. They provide additional interviews. They allow their home to be searched multiple times. They submit DNA samples. They give handwriting samples. They do everything their lawyers advise. But the cloud of suspicion never lifts. In 2006, a bizarre development occurs. A man named John Mark Carr, a 41-year-old former schoolteacher living in Thailand, confesses to killing JonBenét. He's arrested by Thai police on unrelated child pornography charges. During questioning, he tells investigators he was with JonBenét when she died. He says it was an accident, that he loved her, that her death was unintentional. He provides details about the crime. He's extradited to Colorado. The media descends once again. Could this finally be the break in the case? But Carr's confession falls apart under scrutiny. His DNA doesn't match the unknown male DNA from the crime scene. His details about the crime are inaccurate or could have been learned from media reports. He has no documented connection to the Ramsey family. He wasn't in Colorado on December 26, 1996. His story is fantasy, the confession of a disturbed individual obsessed with the case. He's released. Charges are never filed. Another dead end. Another humiliation for the investigation. Another moment when the public's hope for resolution is crushed. John Mark Carr's false confession highlights a problem with high-profile cases. People confess to crimes they didn't commit, sometimes for attention, sometimes because they're mentally ill, sometimes because they've become so obsessed with a case that they insert themselves into it. Over the years, multiple people have confessed to killing JonBenét. None of them were credible. None of their DNA matched. The case has attracted every kind of person imaginable. Conspiracy theorists, true crime fanatics, attention seekers, and each false lead wastes investigative resources and time. In June 2006, just weeks before John Mark Carr's false confession, Patsy Ramsey dies from ovarian cancer at the age of 49. She had been fighting cancer for years. It had gone into remission after her initial diagnosis in 1993, but it returned. She underwent chemotherapy, surgery, treatments. She fought hard. She wanted to live to see JonBenét's case solved. But she died without ever seeing justice for her daughter. She died under a cloud of suspicion, accused by much of the public and parts of the media of a crime she and her husband insisted they did not commit. John Ramsey is left alone, a widower, still fighting to clear his family's name. He's lost his youngest daughter to murder. He's lost his wife to cancer. He's lost his reputation. He's been investigated, scrutinized, accused for a decade. He's spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees. He's given countless interviews. He's provided every piece of evidence requested. And still, the case remains unsolved. Still, people believe he's guilty. The injustice of it all is staggering. In 2008, a breakthrough. DNA technology has advanced significantly in the years since 1996. Touch DNA, which can extract genetic material from skin cells left behind by touch, is now available. The technique is revolutionary. It allows investigators to obtain DNA profiles from evidence that previously yielded no results. steering wheels, door handles, clothing that's been touched. The applications are endless. And for the Ramsey case, it offers new hope. The district attorney's office, now led by Mary Lacey, orders new testing. She sends evidence to Bode Technology, a private forensics lab in Virginia that specializes in DNA analysis. The lab examines JonBenet's long underwear, the long johns she was wearing when she was killed. They focus on areas where someone handling her body might have left traces: the waistband, the hip area, places where hands would naturally grip if you were dressing or moving a child. The results are stunning. The touch DNA from the long underwear matches the unknown male DNA found in JonBenet's underwear years earlier. It's the same person, the same genetic profile. This isn't contamination from a factory. This isn't random transfer. This is consistent DNA from multiple pieces of evidence. DNA that was deposited at the time of the crime, or very close to it. The presence of the same DNA on two different pieces of JonBenet's clothing she was wearing when she died, is significant. It suggests this person had direct contact with JonBenet's body. Mary Lacey takes an extraordinary step. In July 2008, she sends a letter to John Ramsey formally apologizing and clearing the Ramsey family. The letter is remarkable. It acknowledges the years of suspicion, the pain the family has endured, and states unequivocally that the DNA evidence exonerates them. The DNA is very significant, Lacey writes. It's powerful evidence. The Ramsey family is innocent. They've been through hell and they deserve an apology. Lacey's letter states, "The Boulder District Attorney's Office does not consider any member of the Ramsey family, including John, Patsy, or Burke Ramsey, as suspects in this case. We make this announcement now because we have recently obtained this new scientific evidence that adds significantly to the exculpatory value of the previous scientific evidence. We do this to publicly acknowledge that the Ramsey family, who have been subjected to unimaginable scrutiny and criticism, are innocent persons. But not everyone agrees. Critics argue that touch DNA can be transferred innocently, that it could have come from anyone who handled the clothing before it reached JonBenét, that it could be from a store employee, a factory worker, someone who packaged the underwear, that Mary Lacey's exoneration was premature and politically motivated. The Boulder Police Department distances itself from her statement. They release their own statement saying the investigation is ongoing, that they continue to pursue all leads, and that they're not ruling anyone out. The divide between the DA's office and the police is as wide as ever. Stan Garnett, who succeeded Mary Lacey as Boulder District Attorney in 2009, walks back her exoneration. He states that the DNA evidence is important but not conclusive, that it's one piece of evidence among many, that the case is still open, still under investigation. He doesn't explicitly reaccuse the Ramseys, but he makes it clear that the exoneration was Mary Lacey's opinion, not a definitive legal determination. The family is back in limbo, cleared by one DA, not cleared by the next. The nightmare continues. The DNA itself deserves closer examination. It's a mixture, meaning it contains genetic material from more than one person. This is common in touch DNA samples. When multiple people touch an item, their DNA mingles. But forensic analysts can separate out the contributors, identify the major profile, and determine the likelihood that a specific individual is the source. In this case, the major profile is male. It's consistent across both the underwear and the long johns. It doesn't match anyone in the Ramsey family. It doesn't match any of the friends or police officers who were in the house that day. It's an unknown male. The amount of DNA is small. Touch DNA samples are often measured in picograms, trillionths of a gram. The profile obtained from the long johns is partial, meaning not all genetic markers are present, but the markers that are present match the profile from the underwear. The statistical probability that this is a random match is extremely low, in the range of 1 in several million or more, depending on which genetic markers are compared. In other words, it's highly likely that the same person's DNA is on both pieces of clothing. John Ramsey, now in his 80s, continues to push for answers. He's been advocating for the use of advanced genetic genealogy, the same technique used to catch the Golden State Killer. In 2018, investigators working on the Golden State Killer case, cold for decades, used DNA from crime scenes and cross-referenced it with public genealogy databases like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. They built family trees, identified distant relatives, and worked backward to find a suspect. Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested after more than 40 years of evading justice. It was a watershed moment for cold case investigations. Genetic genealogy has since been used to solve dozens of cold cases. Murders, rapes, unidentified bodies. The technique is powerful. It doesn't require a direct match in a criminal database. Instead, it uses DNA to find relatives, people who share genetic markers with the suspect. Once relatives are identified, investigators build a family tree, narrowing down potential suspects based on age, location, and other factors. It's painstaking work, but it's effective, and John Ramsey wants it applied to JonBenet's case. In 2023, John Ramsey appeared in a Netflix documentary, Cold Case: Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey? He spoke openly about his desire to see genetic genealogy used. He's reached out to genetic genealogy firms, including Othram Inc. and Parabon Nanolabs, companies that specialize in this type of DNA analysis. Some have expressed willingness to work on the case pro bono, but there's a problem. The Boulder Police Department has refused to release the DNA evidence to outside labs. They maintain control over the evidence, and they've resisted efforts to use genetic genealogy. Why? John Ramsey believes it's ego, that the department doesn't want to admit their initial focus on the family was wrong, that they've invested so many years and resources into the family theory that they can't pivot, that solving the case through genetic genealogy, which would likely identify an intruder, would be an admission of failure. It's a harsh accusation, but John Ramsey is not alone in this belief. Other experts, journalists, and even some former Boulder police officials have expressed similar concerns. But in late 2024, something shifts. Following pressure from the public, media attention from documentaries, and advocacy from John Ramsey, the Boulder police announced they are consulting with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and external DNA labs to explore new testing methods, including genetic genealogy. It's not a full commitment, but it's progress. For John Ramsey, it's a glimmer of hope. After 28 years, could the DNA finally reveal the killer's identity? The Boulder Police Department released a statement in December 2024. The killing of Jonbenet was an unspeakable crime, and this tragedy has never left our hearts. We are committed to following up on every lead, and we are continuing to work with DNA experts and our law enforcement partners around the country until this tragic case is solved. This investigation will always be a priority for the Boulder Police Department. Let's talk about what the DNA actually shows and why it matters. The unknown male DNA has been found in multiple locations on Jonbenet's body and clothing. It's in her underwear, mixed with her blood. It's on her long johns, in areas where someone would touch if they were handling her body. The presence of the same DNA profile in multiple locations is significant. It suggests this person had direct intimate contact with Jonbenet, not casual contact, not the kind of transfer that happens when someone touches a piece of clothing in a store. This is DNA deposited through prolonged or forceful contact. The DNA is also mixed with Jonbenet's blood in the underwear. Blood is a bodily fluid. When DNA is found mixed with blood, it suggests the DNA was deposited at the time the blood was present, or very shortly thereafter. The blood in Jonbenet's underwear came from the injuries she sustained. The DNA mixed with that blood was likely deposited by whoever inflicted those injuries or was present when they occurred. This is forensic evidence that points to a perpetrator. It's a mixture, meaning it contains DNA from more than one person. But the primary male profile is consistent across samples. It's not John Ramsey. It's not Burke Ramsey. It's not any of the family friends who were in the house that morning. It's not any of the police officers or first responders. It's someone unknown. Someone whose DNA has never been matched to any individual in any database, criminal or otherwise. Who is this person? There are theories, of course. One possibility is an intruder, someone who broke into the house that night with the intent to kidnap or harm Jonbenet. The basement window, even if it was broken previously, could have been an entry point. The unidentified fibers found on Jonbenet's body, fibers that don't match anything in the house, could have come from the intruder's clothing. The scuff marks on the wall near the window. The unidentified footprint, a high-tech boot print, found in the mold in the wine cellar near Jonbenet's body. None of the Ramseys owned high-tech boots. All of it could point to an outsider. But if that's true, how did this person know the layout of the house? The Ramsey home is large, confusing, with multiple levels and rooms. How did an intruder navigate it in the dark? How did they find JonBenet's bedroom? How did they write a ransom note using materials from inside the home? Materials that would require familiarity with where things were kept. How did they know about John's bonus? The intruder theory has always struggled with these questions, but the DNA keeps pointing back to it. Another theory involves someone close to the family, but not a family member. A friend, an employee, a contractor, someone with access to the house who knew the routines, who knew where JonBenet's bedroom was, who could move through the house without immediately raising alarm. The Ramseys had recently completed renovations. Construction workers had been in the house. There had been a Christmas party at the house days before with many guests. Could someone have used that opportunity to scout the house, to plan? Could someone have taken a key, made a copy, and returned later? There's been speculation about various individuals over the years. Bill McReynolds, who played Santa Claus at a Ramsey Christmas party on December 23rd, 3 days before JonBenet's death. McReynolds was a retired journalism professor, gentle and beloved, but his wife had written a play years earlier about a young girl being murdered in a basement. The coincidence was too strange for some investigators. McReynolds was investigated thoroughly. He provided DNA samples. His DNA didn't match. He was cleared. He died in 2002, still haunted by the suspicion that had been cast on him. There was also speculation about Michael Helgoth, a local man who worked for a junkyard near the Ramsey home. Helgoth had a history of erratic behavior. He owned high-tech boots. He allegedly made statements to friends suggesting he knew something about JonBenet's death. In February 1997, 2 months after JonBenet's murder, Helgoth died from a gunshot wound to the head. The death was ruled a suicide. Some investigators believe Helgoth could have been involved in JonBenet's murder and killed himself out of guilt. But his DNA, obtained post-mortem, didn't match the unknown male DNA. Another dead end. Then there's the intruder theory taken to a darker place. Some investigators believe JonBenét was the victim of a predator, someone who had been watching her, possibly through her beauty pageant appearances, someone who saw an opportunity on Christmas night. This theory is supported by the sexual trauma found during the autopsy and the presence of unknown DNA. The thought is chilling. A stranger fixated on a 6-year-old girl, someone who stalked her, learned about her family, and struck when the opportunity arose. But no evidence has ever conclusively proven this scenario. No suspect has been identified. No individual with a history of similar crimes has been linked to the case. The theory remains speculation, terrifying but unproven, and it raises difficult questions. How would a stranger know about John's bonus? How would they navigate the house? How would they write a ransom note using materials from inside the home? The logistics don't quite fit, unless the person wasn't entirely a stranger, unless they had some connection, however tenuous, to the family or the house. What about Burke? For years, he was the subject of intense speculation. Burke Ramsey was 9 years old on the night JonBenét died. He's given very few interviews over the years. He stayed out of the public eye, lived his life quietly. But in 2016, he agreed to an interview with Dr. Phil McGraw. Burke spoke calmly, sometimes smiling at inappropriate moments, which some viewers found unsettling. He maintained he had nothing to do with his sister's death. He said he was asleep, that he didn't hear anything unusual that night. That same year, CBS aired a documentary, The Case of JonBenét Ramsey, which presented a theory that Burke accidentally killed his sister during a late-night confrontation, possibly over the bowl of pineapple, and that John and Patsy covered it up. The documentary used a panel of experts, including a retired FBI profiler, a forensic pathologist, and a former police chief. They conducted experiments, tested theories, and concluded that Burke could have struck JonBenét with a flashlight, causing the head injury, and that the parents then staged the scene to protect their son. Burke Ramsey sued CBS, the producers, and the experts for $750 million for defamation. He argued that the documentary destroyed his reputation, accused him of murder without evidence, and caused him severe emotional distress. The case dragged on for years. In 2019, it was settled for an undisclosed amount. The terms of the settlement are confidential, but the lawsuit and settlement highlighted the ongoing pain the case continues to inflict on Burke and his family. Burke's DNA does not match the unknown male DNA. He's been repeatedly cleared by investigators based on forensic evidence, but the speculation hasn't stopped. The theory that Burke was involved, accidentally or otherwise, persists in some circles, fueled by the CBS documentary and online discussions. For Burke, now in his 30s, the case is an inescapable part of his identity. He's defined by his sister's murder, by the accusations, by the scrutiny. It's a burden no one should have to carry. The pineapple remains a puzzle. It's undeniable that Jonbenet ate pineapple shortly before her death. The autopsy confirmed it. It's undeniable that a bowl of pineapple was found in the kitchen with fingerprints from Patsy and Burke. So why do John and Patsy insist Jonbenet never woke up, never ate anything after returning home? Are they lying? Or is there an explanation they don't have? Did Jonbenet wake up on her own, go downstairs and eat pineapple without her parents knowing? And if so, who else was awake? The pineapple came from a can found in the Ramsey kitchen. Fresh pineapple chunks in natural juice. The bowl contained chunks of pineapple and some rind. The spoon in the bowl was a large serving spoon, not a typical eating utensil for a child. Burke's fingerprints were on the bowl. Patsy's were on the bowl. But no one admits to preparing or serving the pineapple. It's as if the bowl appeared magically. This small detail, the pineapple, has become one of the most debated pieces of evidence. Some believe it's the key to understanding what happened that night. Others think it's being overanalyzed, that it's not as significant as people believe. Forensic experts have debated every aspect of this case, the head injury and the strangulation. Which came first? Dr. Cyril Wecht, a prominent forensic pathologist who has reviewed the autopsy, believes the head blow came first, rendering Jonbenet unconscious almost immediately. He estimates she would have been comatose, unable to speak or cry out. The strangulation, he believes, came later, perhaps 45 minutes to 2 hours afterward. If that's true, it raises the question, why would someone strangle a child who was already dying from a head injury? Dr. Wecht has suggested that the strangulation could have been an attempt to finish what the head blow started, or it could have been staging, an attempt to make the death look like something it wasn't. If the head blow was accidental, perhaps delivered in a moment of rage or frustration, the person responsible might have panicked. They might have tried to cover it up by making it look like a kidnapping gone wrong. The garrote, the duct tape, the ransom note, all staging. This theory fits with the evidence, but it's speculative. Without a confession or a witness, we can't know for certain. Other experts disagree on the timeline. Some believe the strangulation came first, or that both injuries occurred close together in time. The debate is technical, involving issues like brain swelling, hemorrhaging, and the body's response to trauma. What's clear is that Jonbenet suffered 2 devastating injuries. The head injury alone could have been fatal. The strangulation certainly was. Together, they ensured her death. The brutality is undeniable. The intent, whether to kill or to stage, remains a matter of interpretation. The ransom note has been analyzed by linguists, handwriting experts, and behavioral analysts. The language is unusual. It's verbose, almost novelistic. It references movies, Dirty Harry, and Speed. It uses phrases that seem out of place in a genuine ransom note. "Don't try to grow a brain, John," is a line directly from Dirty Harry. "The 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you," sounds like movie dialogue. Who writes like this in a real kidnapping? The note also contains inconsistencies. It warns John not to contact police, yet it was found before the police were called, meaning the writer had to anticipate that Patsy would see it and call 911 immediately. The note says the kidnappers will call between 8 and 10 a.m., but no call ever comes. The note demands a specific amount, $118,000, and provides detailed instructions for delivering the ransom, but none of it is ever followed through. It's as if the note was written for appearance, not for function. Linguistic analysis has focused on the writer's education, vocabulary, and patterns of speech. The note is well written, with correct spelling and grammar, suggesting the writer is educated. But there are oddities. The phrase "and hence" is used, which is somewhat formal. The phrase "attaché" is misspelled as attaché without the accent. The phrase "Southern common sense" is strange, given that John Ramsey is not from the South. These details have been pored over by experts, but no definitive conclusions have been reached. Patsy Ramsey's handwriting. Multiple experts concluded they could not eliminate her as the author of the ransom note. The letter formations, the slant, the spacing, certain quirks, all showed similarities to Patsy's known handwriting samples. But other experts found significant differences. They noted that the note's writer used a different pen grip, formed certain letters differently, and had a different baseline consistency. Handwriting analysis is not an exact science. It's subjective, interpretive. In this case, it has provided no clear answer. Patsy could have written the note, or someone else could have. We simply don't know. What about John Ramsey's behavior? He found the body. He picked her up, carried her upstairs. Was this the natural reaction of a father? Absolutely. Most parents, seeing their child, would instinctively want to hold them, to try to help, even if it's too late. But it also served to contaminate evidence. John's clothing fibers were found on JonBenet's body. His DNA was on her body. This is expected. He's her father. But it muddied the forensic picture. It made it harder to distinguish which evidence was probative and which was innocent transfer. Some investigators believe John knew where JonBenét was all along, that his search of the basement was not a genuine discovery, but a planned reveal. They point to the fact that he went directly to the wine cellar, a room that was out of the way, not an obvious place to search. They suggest he was following a script, staging the discovery to appear innocent. Others believe he was a grieving father acting on instinct, desperately hoping against hope that his daughter could be saved, that he could do something, anything, to help her. Detective Linda Arndt's testimony about that moment is haunting. She said that when John carried JonBenet's body upstairs, she looked at him and felt a visceral sense of danger. She said she counted the people in the house, counted her bullets, and realized she was outnumbered. She believed in that moment that John Ramsey was guilty. Her testimony has been both praised and criticized. Some see it as brave honesty. Others see it as unprofessional bias. But it reflects the chaotic, confusing atmosphere in the Ramsey home that day. No one knew what was happening. No one was in control. And a little girl was dead. The Boulder Police Department's handling of the case has been criticized for decades. The failure to properly secure the crime scene is the most glaring error. In any homicide investigation, the first priority is to secure the scene, preserve evidence, and control who enters and exits. None of that happened at the Ramsey home. People wandered freely. Evidence was touched, moved, contaminated. The body was moved before forensic teams arrived. It's a textbook example of how not to handle a crime scene. The delay in interviewing the Ramseys separately and thoroughly is another major criticism. John and Patsy were not formally interviewed by police until April 1997, 4 months after JonBenet's death. By that time, memories had faded, stories had been rehearsed, and lawyers had prepared their clients. The initial window for obtaining spontaneous, unrehearsed statements was lost. This delay gave the defense a significant advantage and made the investigation much more difficult. The leaks to the media were also damaging. Throughout the investigation, details were leaked to reporters. Information about the ransom note, details from the autopsy, theories about the family's involvement. Some of these leaks came from within the Boulder Police Department. Others came from the DA's office. The leaks fueled media speculation, tainted the jury pool, and made it nearly impossible to prosecute the case fairly. By the time the grand jury convened, the case had been tried in the media 1,000 times over. The internal conflicts between detectives and prosecutors turned the investigation into a war zone. Detectives believed the family was guilty and wanted to charge them. The DA's office believed the evidence was insufficient. Neither side trusted the other. Meetings were contentious. Strategy was debated endlessly. And while the two sides fought, the case grew colder. Leads went stale. Witnesses moved away. Evidence degraded. The opportunity for justice slipped away. The case became a symbol of everything that can go wrong in a high-profile investigation. And JonBenét, the victim, became secondary to the circus surrounding her death. Her face was everywhere. Her life was dissected. Her family was accused. But the actual investigation, the painstaking work of gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, building a case, was overshadowed by politics, egos, and media sensationalism. It's a tragedy compounded by failure. Public opinion has been shaped by media coverage, tabloids, true crime shows, documentaries, books. Everyone has a theory. The beauty pageant footage of JonBenét became iconic and controversial. The images of her performing, dressed in elaborate costumes, wearing makeup, became symbols of a larger cultural debate. Was she being exploited? Was the pageant world dangerous? Did it attract predators? These questions have fueled discussions about child safety, the sexualization of children, and the responsibilities of parents in America. JonBenet's death became larger than itself, a cultural moment that forced uncomfortable conversations. In 2016, on the 20th anniversary of JonBenet's death, a wave of documentaries was released. CBS's The Case of JonBenét Ramsey, which pointed to Burke as the most likely suspect. A&E's The Killing of JonBenét, The Truth Uncovered, which leaned toward an intruder theory. Investigation Discovery's JonBenét, An American Murder Mystery, a three-part series that explored multiple theories. Each documentary presented different conclusions. Each claimed to have uncovered new evidence or insights. But none brought the case closer to resolution. If anything, they deepened the confusion and the divisions. Netflix has explored the case multiple times, most recently in the 2024 documentary, Cold Case: Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey. This three-part series interviews John Ramsey extensively. He speaks calmly, rationally about the DNA evidence. He explains genetic genealogy in detail. He insists that if the Boulder Police Department would release the evidence to the right labs, the killer could be identified within months. He's not asking for special treatment. He's asking for justice. He's asking for the tools that have solved other cold cases to be applied to his daughter's case. Could genetic genealogy solve this case? It's possible. The process works like this. DNA from the crime scene is uploaded to genealogy databases. These databases contain DNA profiles from millions of people who have voluntarily submitted their information to trace their ancestry. The DNA is compared against these profiles to find matches, not exact matches, but partial matches indicating familial relationships. Fourth cousins, third cousins. Once matches are found, genealogists build family trees, working backward through generations to identify common ancestors. From there, investigators narrow down potential suspects based on age, geographic location, and other factors. They conduct surveillance, collect fresh DNA samples from potential suspects, perhaps from a discarded coffee cup or cigarette, and compare it to the crime scene DNA. If it matches, they have their suspect. This method has solved the Golden State Killer case, the NorCal rapist case, dozens of cold case murders and rapes. It's a game changer for law enforcement, and it could work for JonBenet's case. But there are challenges. The DNA sample from JonBenet's case is a mixture. It contains genetic material from more than one person. Genetic genealogy works best with high-quality, single-source DNA. However, techniques exist to separate out the contributors in a mixture and isolate the major profile. It's complex, requiring specialized expertise and advanced software, but it's possible. Companies like Othram Inc. and Parabon Nanolabs have successfully worked with mixed samples and partial profiles. It's not easy, but for a case as important as this, the effort is justified. The other challenge is cooperation. The Boulder Police Department must agree to release the evidence to these labs. So far, they have been hesitant. In statements, they've said they're exploring all options, consulting with experts, and committed to solving the case. But they haven't publicly committed to genetic genealogy. They haven't released the DNA to independent labs, despite John Ramsey's repeated requests. The resistance is frustrating. To the family, to the public, to everyone who wants closure for JonBenét. John Ramsey is not giving up. He's 80 years old. He's lost his daughter. He's lost his wife. He's lost years of his life to this case. But he believes the truth is within reach. "I want to know who did this before I die," he said in interviews. "Not for me, for JonBenét. She deserves justice. She deserves to be remembered for more than a mystery. She deserves resolution." It's a father's plea. A simple request: use the tools available, test the DNA, find the killer, bring closure. The Boulder Police Department releases statements every few years, usually around the anniversary of JonBenet's death, reaffirming their commitment to solving the case. In December 2024, they issued another statement. "We are committed to following up on every lead. We are continuing to work with DNA experts and our law enforcement partners. This investigation will always be a priority, but tangible progress has been minimal. The case remains open. Over 21,000 tips have been received. Over 1,000 individuals have been interviewed or investigated. Hundreds have been cleared through DNA testing. But the killer, if still alive, remains free. What happened in that house on December 26, 1996? Let's consider the possibilities. The simplest answer, the one supported by the DNA evidence, is that an intruder entered the home. The method of entry is unclear. It could have been the basement window, despite the lack of disturbance in the windowsill dust. It could have been an unlocked door. The Ramseys admitted they didn't always lock every door. It could have been someone with a key, someone who had been in the house before. This person, for reasons we don't fully understand, targeted JonBenét. Maybe they had seen her at a pageant. Maybe they knew the family. Maybe they worked on the house during renovations. They entered the home late at night or early in the morning. They encountered JonBenét. They took her to the basement. They assaulted her. They struck her on the head, possibly with the flashlight found on the kitchen counter, a flashlight that didn't belong to the Ramseys and bore no fingerprints. They strangled her with a garrote. They left her body in the wine cellar. But the intruder theory struggles with the ransom note. How did this person write a 3-page note using materials from inside the house? How did they know about John's bonus? How did they have time to sit down, compose the note, make a false start, and write 3 pages? And why? If the intent was to kill JonBenét, why write a ransom note at all? If the intent was to kidnap her for ransom, why kill her and leave her in the house? The note doesn't fit the intruder scenario neatly. Unless the note was written before the murder, perhaps as part of a plan that went wrong. There's another possibility that's uncomfortable to consider. What if there was an intruder, but the family's behavior afterward, perhaps out of fear, confusion, or a misguided attempt to protect themselves, made them appear guilty? Human behavior under extreme stress is unpredictable. Innocent people sometimes act guilty. They give inconsistent statements. They lawyer up. They appear defensive. It doesn't mean they're responsible. It means they're terrified. The Ramseys were thrust into a nightmare. Their daughter was murdered in their home. They were immediately suspects. Can we really judge their behavior in those circumstances? Then there's the theory that someone in the family was involved. This theory dominated the investigation for years. The Boulder police believed it. Much of the public believed it. The evidence, circumstantial as it was, seemed to point that way. The ransom note written on Patsy's notepad, the garrote made from Patsy's paintbrush, the lack of forced entry, the pineapple with Burke and Patsy's fingerprints, the family's behavior, which some found suspicious, the perceived staging of the crime scene. All of it suggested an inside job, a cover-up. But the DNA doesn't fit this theory. The unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's body and clothing doesn't match anyone in the family. It doesn't match any of their friends or associates who have been tested. It's someone else, someone unknown. This DNA is the elephant in the room. It's the piece of evidence that doesn't fit the family theory, and it's why Mary Lacey exonerated the Ramseys in 2008. The DNA, she believed, proved their innocence. But as we've seen, not everyone agrees with that interpretation. Could the DNA be explained away? Some argue yes. They say touch DNA can be transferred innocently, that it doesn't necessarily indicate the presence of a killer. They point out that the underwear could have been contaminated at the factory, the store, or by someone who handled it before JonBenét wore it. They argue that the DNA on the long johns could have come from a similar source. But this explanation requires believing in a series of coincidences, that the same person's DNA ended up on 2 different pieces of clothing, that this DNA was mixed with JonBenét's blood, that it was in locations consistent with someone handling her body. It's possible, but it stretches credulity. There's another layer to this case that deserves attention. The autopsy revealed signs of sexual trauma, both acute and possibly chronic. This finding has led some investigators to believe that JonBenét was being sexually abused prior to her death. If that's true, it opens up a horrifying new dimension to the case. Was she killed to silence her? Was the murder committed by someone who had been abusing her? Or were the chronic injuries misinterpreted, perhaps the result of normal childhood issues like irritation or infection? Medical experts disagree on this point. Some, like Dr. Cyril Wecht, believe the evidence of chronic abuse is compelling. Others argue that the findings are inconclusive, that they could have innocent explanations. The debate is highly technical, involving microscopic examination of tissue, interpretation of injuries, and medical literature on childhood anatomy. What's beyond dispute is that JonBenét suffered injuries consistent with sexual contact on the night she died. Whether there was a history of abuse remains a matter of expert disagreement. If there was ongoing abuse, it would provide a motive. Abusers kill their victims to prevent disclosure. It happens. But if JonBenét was being abused, by whom? The investigation found no evidence of abuse by family members. No witnesses reported suspicious behavior. No other children in the family or extended family reported abuse. Pediatricians who examined JonBenét in the months before her death noted no signs of trauma or abuse. If abuse was occurring, it was hidden extraordinarily well, or it wasn't happening at all, and the injuries have been misinterpreted. The media's role in this case cannot be overstated. From the moment the story broke, JonBenét's face was everywhere. Tabloids ran wild with speculation. "Parents did it" was a common headline. Leaked information fueled the fire. The beauty pageant footage was played endlessly, often with sinister music and ominous narration. The public formed opinions based on incomplete, often inaccurate information. And once those opinions were formed, they were hard to change. The Ramseys became villains in the public imagination. They were wealthy. They put their daughter in pageants. They lawyered up quickly. They didn't cooperate fully with police, at least not in the way police wanted. All of this was used against them. But wealthy people have every right to hire lawyers. Parents who lose a child in a traumatic way often struggle to cooperate with investigations. And beauty pageants, while controversial, are not evidence of wrongdoing. The rush to judgment was unfair and, if the DNA evidence is to be believed, wrong. But the damage was done. Patsy Ramsey lived the last decade of her life under suspicion. She was accused, tried, and convicted in the court of public opinion. She never got to clear her name in a meaningful way. She died still fighting. John Ramsey has spent nearly 3 decades defending himself, his late wife, and his son. The toll on the family has been immeasurable. Burke Ramsey, who was 9 years old when his sister died, has lived his entire adult life under a cloud of suspicion. He's had to sue to defend his reputation. He's had to watch documentaries that accused him of murder. The injustice is staggering. In recent years, there's been a shift in public perception. More people are questioning the early rush to judgment. More people are paying attention to the DNA evidence. More people are willing to consider that maybe, just maybe, the Ramseys were telling the truth all along. Maybe there was an intruder. Maybe the family has been wrongly accused. Maybe the real killer is still out there, living freely, never held accountable for taking a 6-year-old girl's life. The case has also sparked important conversations about how we investigate crimes, how we treat suspects, and how media coverage can prejudice cases before they ever reach a courtroom. The Ramsey case is a cautionary tale. It shows what happens when police focus too quickly on one theory. What happens when evidence is contaminated? What happens when leaks to the media taint public opinion? What happens when politics and egos interfere with justice? These lessons are important. They've led to changes in how some departments handle high-profile cases, but they came too late for JonBenét. What would justice look like at this point? For John Ramsey, it's simple. Identify the killer. Prove the family's innocence. Let the world know that they were victims, not perpetrators. For the public, it's closure. An answer to the question that has haunted us for 28 years. Who killed JonBenét? For law enforcement, it's accountability, solving a case that has become a symbol of failure. Showing that even decades later, with advanced technology and persistence, justice can be achieved. Genetic genealogy offers a path forward. It's not guaranteed. The DNA sample may not be sufficient for the technique. The genealogy databases may not contain the right relatives. The suspect may be deceased. But it's the best lead this case has ever had. It's the difference between a case that remains forever unsolved and a case that could finally be closed. The question is whether the Boulder Police Department will seize this opportunity or let it slip away. John Ramsey believes they will. He has to believe it. Because the alternative, that his daughter's killer will never be found, that her death will remain a mystery forever, is unbearable. So he keeps fighting. He keeps speaking out. He appears in documentaries. He gives interviews. He writes to investigators. He contacts genetic genealogy firms. He does everything he can to keep pressure on the authorities to act. And he waits, hoping that before he dies, he will finally know the truth. The truth is out there, somewhere, in that DNA sample. In a genealogy database? In a family tree that connects to a distant relative of the killer? In records and documents that haven't been fully explored? The pieces exist. They just need to be put together. And with today's technology, with genetic genealogy, with advanced forensic techniques, it's possible. It's within reach. The question is whether we as a society have the will to pursue it. JonBenét Ramsey would be 34 years old today. She would have lived a full life, graduated high school, gone to college, pursued a career, fallen in love, started a family of her own. She might have continued performing, maybe as an actress or singer. She might have become a teacher, a lawyer, a doctor. She had potential. She had a future. And it was stolen from her on December 26, 1996. She deserves justice. She deserves to be remembered as more than a victim, more than a mystery, more than a tabloid headline. Her family deserves peace. John Ramsey deserves to live his remaining years without the weight of suspicion. Burke Ramsey deserves to be free from the accusations that have followed him his entire adult life. Patsy Ramsey, though no longer alive, deserves to have her name cleared, her memory honored. They've all suffered enough. They've all paid a price for a crime they insist they didn't commit. If the DNA evidence is to be believed, they're telling the truth. And if they're telling the truth, then the real killer has never been held accountable. This is not just a cold case. This is a test of our justice system, a test of our willingness to follow evidence wherever it leads, even when it contradicts our preconceptions, a test of our ability to admit mistakes and correct them, a test of our commitment to victims and their families. JonBenét Ramsey's case is all of these things. And how we handle it, how we respond to the opportunity presented by genetic genealogy, will say a lot about who we are as a society. The evidence exists. The technology exists. The expertise exists. What's missing is action. Action from the Boulder Police Department to release the DNA to the best labs. Action from prosecutors to support new investigative approaches. Action from the public to demand justice over spectacle. Action from the media to focus on facts rather than sensationalism. If all of these pieces come together, if everyone involved puts aside egos and politics and focuses on the goal of solving this case, it can happen. The killer can be identified. Justice can be achieved. Even after 28 years. December 26, 1996. A little girl was murdered in her own home. Her killer left DNA behind. That DNA has never been matched to any individual in any database. But with genetic genealogy, with advanced forensic techniques, with persistence and determination, that DNA could finally reveal a name, a face, a person who thought they had gotten away with murder. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Not yet. Not while people like John Ramsey refuse to give up. Not while the evidence sits waiting to be fully utilized. Not while JonBenét's memory demands answers. This case has haunted America for nearly 3 decades. It has destroyed lives, ruined reputations, sparked debates about media ethics, police competence, and the nature of justice. It has become a cultural touchstone, referenced in movies, TV shows, books, and countless true crime discussions. But beneath all the noise, beneath all the theories and speculation and documentaries and debates, there is a simple, heartbreaking truth. A 6-year-old girl was killed. Her killer has never been held accountable. That is unacceptable. That is a failure of justice that demands to be corrected. The DNA evidence is not perfect. It's not a smoking gun that points directly to a specific individual. But it's the best lead this case has ever had. It's a genetic fingerprint left behind by someone who touched JonBenét's body. It's objective. It's scientific. It's not subject to interpretation or bias. It either matches someone or it doesn't. And with genetic genealogy, we have the tools to find out who it matches. We have the ability to trace that DNA back to its source, to identify the person responsible, to finally answer the question that has haunted us for 28 years. The question is whether the investigators, the authorities, the people in power will do what needs to be done. Will they use genetic genealogy? Will they release the evidence to the best experts in the field? Will they prioritize solving this case, even if it means admitting mistakes were made decades ago? Will they put the needs of the victim and her family above institutional pride and political considerations? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary questions. and the answers will determine whether JonBenét Ramsey finally gets justice. John Ramsey believes they will. He has faith that eventually reason will prevail, that the DNA will be tested using every available method, that genetic genealogy will identify the killer, that his daughter's case will be solved. He has to believe it, because the alternative is too painful to contemplate. So he continues to advocate. He continues to speak out. He continues to push for the testing that could finally bring closure, and he waits. This is the story of JonBenét Ramsey, a story that is not yet finished, a story that has captivated millions and frustrated investigators for decades, a story that hinges on DNA evidence, evidence that could unlock the vault and reveal the killer. The science exists, the evidence exists, the technology exists. What happens next is up to those who have the power to act. Up to the Boulder Police Department, up to prosecutors, up to elected officials who can demand accountability, up to all of us who believe that justice matters, that victims deserve answers, that cases like this should never be allowed to grow cold. If this case has intrigued you, if you believe JonBenét deserves justice, make sure you're subscribed to True Crime Vault. Hit that like button. Share this video with anyone who cares about true crime, about unsolved cases, about the pursuit of justice. And drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe genetic genealogy will solve this case? Do you think the DNA will finally reveal the killer's identity? What's your theory about what happened that night? Let me know what you think. And remember, this isn't just a story. This isn't entertainment. This is a real little girl who had her life stolen from her. This is a real family that has been torn apart by tragedy and suspicion. This is a real case that demands resolution. JonBenét Ramsey was 6 years old. She loved performing. She loved her family. She had dreams and potential and a whole life ahead of her. And on December 26, 1996, someone took all of that away. That person needs to be held accountable. That person needs to face justice. And maybe, just maybe, with your help, with public pressure, with attention focused on this case, that justice is finally within reach. JonBenét deserves it. Her family deserves it. And we, as a society that claims to value justice, owe it to her to never stop fighting for answers.